Who are you fighting today that God already defeated yesterday? Have you ever found yourself exhausted, running, striving, negotiating, bargaining with God and with people for doors that are already open? Have you ever bent under the weight of the invisible burden of proving what was already proved for you? That single question should make you stop. If your soul is honest for a single heartbeat, you will admit something in me is still fighting when it should be resting. Listen, the Christian life is not a perpetual struggle to win approval from heaven. It's a discovery of what divine grace has already secured. But many of us live like anxious soldiers on a battlefield where the war has been decided. We argue with providence. We correct God's timetable. We redo finished works. We rehearse the struggle until the struggle becomes our identity. Right now, imagine a courtroom. The verdict has been pronounced in your favor. The gavel fell. Yet you keep returning to the courthouse, re-arguing the case, proving the evidence, showing receipts. Hear me. God is not a judge who keeps reopening a closed case because you won't stop reminding him. Grace doesn't negotiate with your performance. It establishes your position. Why then do we keep fighting? Because of fear. Because of unbelief, because of misread scriptures and misapplied promises, because someone taught you to hustle for salvation instead of receiving rest, because you mistook preparation for possession and effort for identity. Tonight, I will pull back 3 layers that keep saints stranded in struggle. I will expose the lies that wear holiness like a burden. I will show you the markers of settled grace, signs you can't afford to miss. And I will confront the one haunting question you've been dodging. What if everything you've been fighting for was already given the day you believed? Tonight, listen closely. Your rest depends on the answer. Decide tonight to stop fighting now. Here's a 600-word expansion of Keynote 1, the courtroom of grace, written in the tone of a powerful preacher like Apostle Joshua Selman. It's crafted for YouTube, cinematic, emotional, and sermon ready, ending with a strong cliffhanger that naturally leads into Keynote 2. Imagine for a moment that heaven is a courtroom. The atmosphere is thick with silence. The case file in front of the judge bears your name. On one side stands the accuser, relentless, eloquent, armed with the evidence of your past, your fears, your failures. He lays them out one after another, certain that this time, the weight of your imperfection will finally condemn you. The angels watch. The universe waits. And then, before your trembling lips can even form a defense, another voice rises. Calm, commanding, unshaken. Your Honor, the voice says, I have already paid for this one. It is the voice of the advocate, Jesus Christ, the righteous one. And in that instant, something supernatural happens. The gavel descends. The judge declares, case closed. Verdict justified. The file is sealed. The sentence is erased. Heaven's registry marks your name not with guilt, but with grace. Yet here is the tragedy. Many believers walk out of that courtroom only to come back again the next day, begging for a retrial that no longer exists. They stand before a closed case, knocking on a locked door, weeping over pages that have already been burned in the fire of mercy. You keep bringing up what God has already buried. You keep confessing what heaven has already forgotten. The enemy loves this because as long as you're fighting battles that are already won, you'll never fight the ones that actually matter. Do you know what grace truly means? Grace is not God lowering his standard. It is God meeting his standard for you. Grace is justice satisfied in Christ. Grace is divine legality on your side. It is not mercy without order. It is mercy that fulfills every requirement of righteousness. When Jesus said, "It is finished," he was not making a poetic statement. He was closing a legal transaction. The debt was cancelled, not by silence, but by substitution. This is why the gospel is not a plea deal. It's a verdict. You are not on probation. You are free. The judge didn't just forgive you, he justified you. And justification is stronger than forgiveness. Forgiveness says, you are pardoned. Justification says, you are declared righteous. There's a difference. One sets you free. The other gives you a new name. But here's the problem: religion loves open cases. It loves to keep you feeling almost saved, almost worthy, almost accepted, because almost keeps you working. But grace finishes what religion only starts. Grace says, stop trying to prove what I've already declared. And that is why so many of us are tired. We are fighting for acceptance in a courtroom that has already announced our acquittal. Listen carefully. The devil can't undo the verdict, but he can make you doubt it. He can't refile the case, but he can whisper. Maybe the judge will change his mind. And the moment you believe that, you trade your authority for anxiety. You stop walking in dominion and start walking in defense. That's how many Christians live, defending blessings that were meant to be enjoyed, begging for promises that were meant to be lived. Every time you say, Lord, please make me worthy, heaven looks down and says, you already are. Every time you say, God, please give me grace, heaven answers, I gave you myself. But if that's true, if the courtroom of grace has already ruled in your favor, then why do so many believers still live like prisoners awaiting trial? Why do we still perform for approval, strive for validation, and exhaust ourselves trying to earn what was freely given? Something deeper must be wrong. Something in how we see ourselves, something about identity, something that performance has stolen from possession. Because until you know who you are in that courtroom, you'll never understand what you have outside it. And that is where the next secret begins. Here's the 600-word expansion of Keynote 2. Identity, possession, vis performance. Written in the same anointed, dramatic, and sermon style tone as a preacher, like Apostle Joshua Selman. It builds from the previous keynote and ends with a powerful cliffhanger that leads naturally into the next message. The lies that keep you struggling. The greatest confusion in the body of Christ is not about prayer, power, or prophecy. It is about identity. The war over your soul is not primarily fought in the realm of sin or temptation. It is fought in the realm of identity. Who do you believe you are? Because how you see yourself determines how you receive what God gives. Many believers are not denied access to blessings. They simply don't recognize that they already own them. In the courtroom of grace, your identity was established the moment Christ was declared your substitute. You move from sinner trying to become righteous to righteous learning to overcome sin. But religion doesn't like that shift. Religion teaches you to perform for position, to fight for approval, to earn what you already possess. It says, if I pray long enough, God will love me more. If I fast harder, maybe I'll be accepted. If I work tirelessly, then I deserve the promise. But grace whispers, you are already accepted. You are already beloved. You are already positioned. The difference between possession and performance is the difference between rest and restlessness. Possession begins from completion. Performance begins from deficiency. When you know that you have, you act from gratitude. When you think you lack, you act from fear. That's why so many Christians serve God anxiously. Not as sons who belong, but as servants who hope to be noticed. They confuse activity with intimacy, and in doing so, they burn out spiritually while never feeling enough. God did not create you to perform for His love. He created you to live from His love. Performance demands proof. Possession enjoys presence. When you know who you are, you don't beg for validation. You carry revelation. The prodigal son is the perfect picture. Two sons in one house, both missing the father's heart. The younger one thought he had to leave to find worth. The elder thought he had to work to earn favor. Both were wrong. The father looked at the elder and said, "Son, all that I have is yours." Do you hear that? All that I have is yours, yet we still act like orphans in our father's mansion. We fight for love in the very house of love. We sing about grace but live like slaves. And so the father waits not for more performance, but for awakening. The Spirit of God is not impressed by your motion. He's moved by your faith. Understand this: the devil does not fear your activities. He fears your awareness, because once you realize you are a son, his manipulation loses power. He can't guilt-trip revelation. When Jesus stood before Satan in the wilderness, the first attack was not about bread or kingdoms. It was about identity. If you are the Son of God, the enemy questioned his if. The same attack continues today. Every time you doubt your standing, you fall into striving. The difference between trying to be and knowing you are determines whether you live free or frustrated. You can pray from fear or from authority. You can worship to be accepted or because you are accepted. One drains you, the other transforms you. And that is why grace is not lazy. It's liberated. True rest is not inactivity. It is secure activity. You still serve, but not to earn. You still give, but not to be seen. You still obey, but not to qualify. You do it because it's your nature, not your negotiation. But here is the tension. If we are truly sons, if we already possess divine favor and righteousness, why do we still live as though we're earning rent in a house already bought for us? Why do we still feel unworthy after hearing sermons about grace again and again? Something is keeping that truth from settling deep enough to change us. Something whispers louder than revelation. What if there are ancient lies, subtle, religious, familiar, that disguise themselves as humility but keep you chained to performance? What if what you call discipline is sometimes just disbelief wearing a holy mask? In the next moment, we will uncover those hidden lies, the ones that make free people live like slaves. Here's the 600 word expansion of Keynote 3, the lies that keep you struggling, written in a deep, powerful, preacher-style voice inspired by men of God like Apostle Joshua Selman. It flows naturally from the previous keynote and ends with a strong cliffhanger that sets up the next segment, the markers of settled grace. To shoot every chain that holds a believer is forged first in the mind. The devil does not have to imprison your body if he can imprison your belief. Bondage often begins as a beautifully packaged lie, a deception dressed like truth, carrying the tone of wisdom but the sting of slavery. And the tragedy is this: most believers don't even know they're deceived. We fight shadows thinking they're enemies. We wrestle with lies thinking they're doctrine. There are three major lies that keep believers struggling even after grace has set them free. The first lie says, I must earn it. This is the most common and the most dangerous. It hides behind religious language. I must pray more, fast more, serve more, give more. Then maybe God will bless me. Listen, beloved, there is nothing wrong with prayer, fasting, or service. But the moment you think they've qualified you for grace, you've replaced the cross with your effort. Prayer is not a negotiation table. It's a communion room. Fasting is not a hunger strike to twist God's hand. It's a consecration that aligns your will. Grace does not respond to merit. It responds to faith. You don't earn what Christ already finished. You receive it. The second lie says, if I don't fight for it, I'll lose it. That sounds noble, like something a disciplined believer would say, but it's rooted in fear, not faith. We have confused stewardship with striving. Yes, you must guard what you have received, but guarding is not struggling. Guarding is awareness. Struggling is anxiety. When you think everything depends on your strength, you'll live in panic every time you feel weak. But hear me, the God who gave you grace sustains it. The God who opened the door keeps it open. The power that brought you in is the same power that keeps you standing. If you could lose grace by effort, it wouldn't be grace. It would be wages. And the third lie, the most subtle, says, my worth is what I accomplish. This one hides deep in the heart. It's not shouted, it's whispered. You see it when you fail and instantly feel unworthy. You sense it when God blesses another and you question your own calling. That lie turns ministry into competition, worship into performance, and success into idolatry. You begin to measure your identity by outcomes instead of obedience. You say, if I do well, then God is pleased. But the truth is, God's pleasure was established before your performance ever began. He said of Jesus, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Before it, Jesus worked a single miracle. That is your pattern. You are loved before you perform, accepted before you achieve, and valued before you succeed. Every lie that keeps you struggling feeds off one thing: ignorance of the finished work. Satan doesn't need new weapons. He just needs old lies believed again. That's why the Bible calls him the accuser, not the inventor. He doesn't create new sins. He replays old guilt. And until you confront those lies with truth, you will keep living like a beggar at a feast. Listen to me, grace is not a theory. It's a reality. The more you feed on the truth of who you are, the weaker the lies become. But the moment you stop reminding yourself of the finished work, those lies creep back, whispering doubt, shame, and fear. They make you question what God has already settled. They make you wrestle with peace as if it were a prize to win instead of a gift to enjoy. But here is the question that must be asked. If these lies are so deadly, so destructive, so draining, how do you know when you finally escape them? How can you tell when grace has truly settled a man's heart? When the struggle is finally over, not just in word, but in reality. There are signs, unmistakable signs, that grace has taken root. Not mystical, not imaginary, but visible evidence that you have entered divine rest. In the next moment, I will show you the markers of settled grace, proofs that your war is over and your peace has begun. Here's the 600-word expansion of Keynote 4. Markers of settled grace. Written in the same rich, powerful sermon style voice, continuing seamlessly from the previous keynote and ending with a strong cliffhanger that stirs hunger for the next one. Practical steps to walk out rest. How do you know when grace has truly settled a man? How can you tell when someone has stopped fighting battles that Jesus already won? It's not written on their face. It's revealed in their posture. Grace changes how you stand before it ever changes how you speak. There are certain marks, certain spiritual fingerprints that show when grace has taken deep root in the heart. These are not outward displays of religion, but inward evidences of rest. The first marker is peace. Not the kind that depends on circumstances, but the kind that confuses the enemy. When grace settles upon a person, storms may rage, yet there's stillness within. You don't panic like you used to. You don't react to every delay or detour. You've learned that grace doesn't always move fast, but it always moves sure. You stop questioning God's timing because you've realized He's never late. He's just precise. That peace is not laziness. It's alignment. It is what happens when the soul stops negotiating with divine timing and starts trusting divine wisdom. The second marker is freedom from performance. You stop living to impress heaven. You stop measuring your worth by your activity. You still pray, fast, serve, and give, but not from fear. You do it from love. You don't panic if you miss a devotion. You simply return in gratitude. You no longer approach God like an employee coming to a boss. You approach Him like a child coming home. You stop competing with others in the name of ministry because settled grace kills comparison. You finally realize that the Father's house has many rooms and your room is not threatened by another's light. The third marker is fruitfulness without striving. When grace settles, results begin to flow naturally. You stop trying to manufacture outcomes, you just obey and things begin to align. It's not that you've become passive. It's that you've become partnered. You labor with grace instead of competing with it. People look at your life and say, you make it look easy. But they don't know that ease is what happens when grace takes the driver's seat. You rest while results appear. The fourth marker is gratitude, constant, overflowing, unprovoked gratitude. You no longer thank God only when something happens. You thank Him because something already did. You live from a posture of remembrance. If He did not spare His Son, will He not freely give me all things? Gratitude becomes your natural language. Complaining sounds foreign in your mouth because you've tasted the mercy that doesn't expire. And the fifth marker is confidence, not arrogance, not pride, but boldness in identity. You stop apologizing for being blessed. You stop feeling guilty for favor. You stand in rooms you once thought were too big for you and realize grace put you there on purpose. You speak with assurance because you know who backs you. The enemy loses his grip on your mind because your confidence is not in your performance, but in God's promise. You see, these markers are not achieved by discipline. They are birthed by revelation. The moment you see what grace has done, you are become what grace declares. You can always tell when someone has entered that realm. They no longer try to win arguments about doctrine. They simply manifest peace. They no longer chase validation, they attract it. They no longer beg God for what they already possess. They walk as though it's done because it is done. But here's the mystery. Even after discovering these markers, some believers still lose their rest. They recognize peace for a moment, then fall back into striving. They feel grace on Sunday, but guilt on Monday. Why? Because revelation alone is not enough. It must become a rhythm. Grace must not only be known, it must be walked out daily. So the question becomes, how do you turn this revelation into a lifestyle? How do you carry settled grace from the altar into your daily routine, your work, your family, your decisions, your waiting seasons? What are the practical, deliberate steps to walk out rest without slipping back into struggle? That is where we go next. Here's the 600-word expansion of Keynote 5. Practical steps to walk out rest. It continues in the same preaching tone, scripturally deep, emotionally charged, and cinematic, flowing naturally from the last keynote and ending with a vast, powerful cliffhanger that leads perfectly into the final keynote. Secret challenge. Let go to receive. To key revelation must become rhythm, or it will fade into memory. Grace is not just a truth to shout about. It is a posture to live from. Many believers have heard the message of rest, but few have ever walked in it. We hear that the work is finished, yet we still wake up every morning fighting invisible wars, worrying, proving, hustling, apologizing. The truth is, walking in rest requires intention. It is not passivity, it is partnership with peace. To walk out rest means to build habits that agree with what grace has already declared. The first step is confession, not the confession of sin, but the confession of truth. You must begin to speak what heaven says, even when your feelings disagree. The word of God is not a mirror of your emotion. It's a mirror of your position. When you wake up in the morning, you declare, I am accepted in the beloved. I am not striving for approval. I already have it. Confession is not positive thinking. It's spiritual alignment. The tongue becomes the steering wheel of your soul. When you speak grace long enough, your heart begins to believe it. And when your heart believes it, your atmosphere shifts. The second step is declaration. Confession reminds you of truth, but declaration enforces it in your environment. You stand in your home, your workplace, your prayer room, and declare, this atmosphere belongs to peace, not fear. This body is a temple of rest, not anxiety. The Bible says, You shall decree a thing, and it shall be established. Every time you declare truth, you establish rest as law in your world. The more you speak from rest, the less chaos finds permission around you. The third step is reorientation. You must restructure your life to reflect your belief in grace. Some of us say we trust God, but our schedules preach unbelief. We run until we collapse, pray only in panic, and plan as if we have no shepherd. To walk out rest means to build rhythms that prove your trust. Take a Sabbath, even if for a few hours. Rest without guilt. Stop checking your phone every 5 minutes as if the world will end without your reply. Slow down enough to hear heaven breathe. Reorientation means creating space for stillness because grace often whispers, never shouts. The fourth step is alignment. You cannot walk in rest surrounded by voices that glorify struggle. You must sit under teachings, friendships, and environments that reinforce grace. The people you listen to are the guardians of your mindset. If you keep feeding on performance-driven faith, you will always feel behind. But if you surround yourself with those who understand finished work, your soul will heal from striving. Alignment is not pride, it's preservation. Guard your peace like treasure. And finally, practice gratitude. Nothing anchors rest like thanksgiving. Every time you thank God for what He has done, you remind your soul that it is finished. Gratitude silences fear and magnifies trust. Even when things seem uncertain, you say, Father, thank you, because grace is already at work. Gratitude turns waiting into worship and delay into dialogue. The thankful heart cannot be anxious because anxiety cannot coexist with remembrance. When you consistently apply these steps, something begins to shift within you. You'll notice that the same storms that once drained you now develop you. You'll stop chasing signs and start carrying peace. You'll find that your prayers become shorter but stronger, your words fewer but weightier. Rest becomes your rhythm, not your reward. But here's the mystery. Even after walking in these steps, confessing, declaring, reorienting, aligning, and thanking, there comes a moment when God asks for something deeper. A moment when grace demands surrender, not strategy. A moment when you must prove that you truly trust Him by letting go. Because rest is not only built through what you do, it is revealed by what you release. So the next question is not what must you start doing, but what must you finally stop holding? And that is where the journey turns from practice to proof. Here's the 600 word expansion of Keynote 6. A challenge, let go to receive. Written in the same anointed, cinematic sermon tone as the earlier sections. It concludes the message arc while ending on a last powerful cliffhanger, pointing toward the test closing call to action and benediction. There comes a point in every believer's journey when grace stops being a doctrine and becomes a demand. It is the moment when God looks you in the eye of your spirit and says, now that you know what I've done, will you trust me enough to stop holding on? Because the final proof of rest is release. You cannot claim to be resting in God while clutching the very things He asked you to surrender. Many people love the language of grace, but fear the lifestyle of trust. We talk about faith until it threatens our control. Letting go is not weakness, it is worship. When you finally drop what you've been gripping, heaven begins to move where your hands once labored. Some of you have been holding on to timelines, deadlines you gave to God without His permission. You told Him when to bless you, how to promote you, whom to send, and when to show up. But grace will often test your surrender by breaking your calendar. God will deliberately delay something to expose your dependence. And when you finally stop arguing with time, you discover that the wait was not punishment. It was positioning. Others have been holding on to fear, the quiet belief that if you don't fight for yourself, no one else will. You've learned survival so well that you call it stewardship. But grace cannot coexist with self-preservation. To live by grace means to risk appearing foolish while trusting that heaven is faithful. Peter only walked on water when he released the safety of the boat. Some of you have stayed in boats built by logic, and you're wondering why the miraculous has stopped visiting your life. The supernatural waits on surrender, and there are those still holding on to pain, memories of betrayal, voices of accusation, disappointments that replay like background music in your soul. You keep carrying what Christ already crucified. Grace cannot fill hands that are full of resentment. Every time you replay the hurt, you reopen a case that heaven closed. Forgiveness is not about pretending nothing happened. It's about believing something greater already did. Letting go is not passive. It is prophetic. It declares, God, you are wiser with this than I am. Every release is an altar, and every altar invites fire. Abraham proved his faith not by quoting Revelation, but by surrendering Isaac, the very promise he prayed for. Sometimes grace will test you with the blessing itself. Will you still trust me if I ask for what I gave you? And when you lay it down, you realize that you never lose what you surrender to God. You only multiply it. Rest, then, is not the absence of action. It is the absence of anxiety. It is saying, Lord, even if I don't understand, I still agree. And in that agreement, the power of grace begins to work beyond your effort. Doors open without your pushing. Opportunities appear without your scheming. Peace becomes your portion, and provision becomes your evidence. But make no mistake, letting go will stretch you. Your flesh will scream for control. Your logic will demand proof, and your emotions will resist silence. Yet it is in that sacred tension that true transformation begins. Because when your grip weakens, God's hand strengthens. When you finally stop wrestling for what's already settled, you experience a dimension of rest that cannot be taught. It can only be entered. And that's the moment heaven waits for. The moment your surrender becomes your sermon. But as we stand on this threshold, there remains one more thing. Something deeper than letting go. Something that seals everything you've learned. Because revelation must end in decision. Grace must end in activation. You've heard the message. You've seen the markers. But now what will you do with it? Stay with me. This is where words become life. Here's a bad 350-word powerful conclusion, written in the tone of a great preacher like Apostle Joshua Selman, filled with authority, emotion, and satisfaction, giving your audience the feeling that they've truly received what they came for. It wraps up the entire message with a strong SF payoff and a deep spiritual as releasing. Poor beloved, this is where it all comes together. The struggle was never proof of your faith. The rest is. The fight was never your calling. The victory was. All along, grace was not waiting to be earned. It was waiting to be believed. Tonight, the courtroom of heaven has spoken. Once again, a case closed. Destiny settled. Grace sufficient. Where you have spent years wrestling with what God already finished. Begging for doors that were never locked. Striving for love that was never withheld. But the light has come. The veil has lifted. The voice of grace thunders over your soul. It is finished. Not halfway done, not almost done. Finished. This is the moment where you exhale the anxiety and inhale the assurance. You don't have to prove yourself to heaven anymore. You don't have to perform for a seat at the table. You are already seated with Christ. Let that truth sink deep. You are not trying to become accepted. You already are. You are not trying to win. You're learning to walk in victory. The war is over. Right now, release every burden you carried here. The timelines, the fear, the guilt, the doubt. Drop them at the altar of grace. Let this be the night your soul stops striving. The Father is not asking you to do more. He is inviting you to rest more. Rest in His love. Rest in His promise. Rest in the finished work. And when you rise from this moment, rise differently. Walk like one who knows heaven is backing them. Speak like one whose case is settled. Live like one who has entered divine rest. Because this is your season of peace, your era of ease, your confirmation that our grace has already settled it. Now go and walk in what is finished.